Chronic underperformance is rarely just an employee problem. It's usually a leadership problem. What happens is that leaders just don't know how to manage underperformers. They either attack them like it's a personal vendetta, or they avoid them because they think it's just going to get better on its own. The result is, if you're a leader in these situations, your team's going to resent you. They're not going to trust you. And your high performers are definitely looking for another job. I had a situation years ago where I had a colleague of mine who was not in HR, different department, and they had their own HR representative, but we were friends. And we would go for lunch together, hang out at company events together, etc. And one day she explains to me that she's depressed, she doesn't like what she does anymore, she's looking for another job. And I was completely shocked because this is a person who was very pro company. She loved everybody, she loved her boss. So I knew something was up because it just wasn't indicative of her behavior. So eventually she told me that there was an employee on the team who had been underperforming for a very long time. And because she's a high performer, her boss kept asking her to pick up the slack and to help, etc. And I was like, okay, I understand, because that's happened to me, it's happened to a lot of people. But then she tells me it had been going on for 7 months. So that's not fair. And now she got to the breaking point where it was potentially that this team was going to lose an amazing employee. She just had it. She couldn't do it anymore. So I decided I wanted to help. 1, because she's my friend, 2, because she's HR, and 3, because she was actually really good for the company. So I went to the manager and I explained to them the situation, and I said, you've been condoning this. You've been allowing this to happen. Why haven't you gone to your HR rep to help work this out? And it's not fair to her or to anyone else who has to pick up the slack. He felt so bad that he actually said, I'm going to figure this out in 48 hours. And I didn't really trust him because I didn't know him very well, and I was like, okay, let's see, since this had been going on for 7 months. And he did. He ended up going to HR. He actually spoke to my friend and apologized and allowed her, or asked her, I should say, can you just give me a couple more weeks to figure this out? They put the employee on a performance improvement plan, and that underperformer just really didn't like it and eventually quit, right? So it was a win-win. They got to keep my employee, or my friend who's an employee, who's a great employee. The boss was happy, and then they hired some fresh new talent that was great for the department. But situations don't always turn out that way, which is why we have to address underperformers. I'm José Larocque Patton, or José LP, and for over 25 years, I help leaders try to make those uncomfortable conversations just a little bit more comfortable. So what do we do now with those underperformers? As leaders, you've got to do something about it, because there's a general rule of thumb. When you allow one underperformer to get away with whatever they want, there's a high probability you're going to lose 2 high performers. That's just what happens. So my first tip for you today on trying to address those underperformers is alignment. What is alignment? You need to have an open conversation with your employee and literally say to them, do you want this job? Or do you want to do the tasks that are part of the position that you have to do? Or how can we have an agreement to ensure that you're going to do what's required of you? Something along those lines, but there needs to be alignment. Now, chances are the person's always going to say yes, right? But you have to keep going and keep pushing and saying, okay, if you say yes, then I expect you to do your job, and I expect you to do them by XYZ deadline, right? You really need to have that sort of agreement so that it's not just you telling the person what to do. You want them to have some sort of buy-in and some sort of skin in the game. So that alignment is really important. Now, further tips on the alignment and what to say, what not to say, etc., I have a free guide for you, so click that link below. The second tip that I have for ensuring that you can not allow those underperformers to stay in the business is you got to document. I'm sure you've heard that one already, right? I mean, being in HR, I'm going to tell you this a million times over. So what do you document though? You need to document one, the job description. So I hope you have a job description. So you need to take out that job description and probably highlight everything that they're not doing. And then remember, most job descriptions always say, we also need you to clean the toilet, right? So if there's other things that you want this person to do, you're gonna have to write it out as well. So it's gotta be well documented. Then you're gonna present this to the employee, because remember, number one, you got alignment that they want to do this, right? They wanna keep their job and they wanna work. So now you've got to be very clear on what those expectations are. And it can't just be verbal, it's gotta be on a document. So documenting what those expectations are with deadlines are going to be very important. Now, a lot of times people are asking me, well, can I just document in 30 days and get rid of them after? Absolutely not. Documentation takes 3 to 6 months. So you're going to be doing this for a little while. And why? Is because you have to give a fair chance to the person. You can't just document them once and expect them to just shape up like that, you know? You've allowed this underperformer to underperform for how long? Now you need to actually give them the benefit of the doubt and point them in that right direction. So make sure that your documentation is very sound, but some more tips, we'll have them in that guide. Now, my third and final one for helping leaders with those underperformers is there is a 10% rule, and sometimes people should just be terminated. So now I sort of contradict myself on tip 2 when I'm telling you that you should document, right? In HR, there's a sort of a general bell curve. 80% of people usually meet all of your expectations. 10% of people, you're high performers, and then the other 10% is usually your underperformers. The problem though, is your underperformers suck the life out of you. They take a lot of attention and time and energy. And so although tip number 2 said you have to document and you got to go through this process for 3 to 6 months, there is an opportunity to terminate. Now, depending on the location of where you are, you may have laws and things that you have to follow, and there's a possibility that you're going to have to pay them out. So if you don't want to pay someone out, you're going to have to flip back to tip number 2. But if you have that ability to open up that checkbook and really just say, I don't think you're a right fit for the business anymore, then take that opportunity to do it. Because if, again, you've allowed this to happen, you've created this bad culture for gosh knows how long. Now, it's not fair either for your company to have to pay because you've been lazy as a leader. So keep that in mind as well. Don't think that you should be terminating every single person because you don't want to performance manage them. That is your job as a leader, so don't forget that. So a recap of what we're thinking now for managing underperformers. Our first one is we always need to have alignment, right? An agreement between you and the employee that yes, they want their job and they're committed and they're going to do what you're going to ask them to do. Number 2 is to document so that you know what you want them to do and they know what they have to do with timelines. And then you follow up every 30 to 45 days. Because remember, that process takes 3 to 6 months. But there's always option number 3 is a termination. And don't forget to check out your laws to ensure that if you're paying them out, you have to, or if you can give them working notice, or again, sometimes you are allowed to terminate if you have causal reason. So I look forward to seeing you for more tips and tricks in our next video.